Hello, everyone. I'm Dave Carter from Turner Classic Movies, and it's my pleasure to be here with the cast and filmmaker of Together Together, Ed Helms, Patty Harrison, and writer, director, exec producer, Nicole Beckwith.
Sorry, I am a little nervous. I've thought a lot more about being a dad than I've thought about making conversation with the person carrying my baby.
Right. Well, I'm nervous too.
To my sperm, to the donor's egg, and to your uterus. Cheers.
Cheers.
I'd like to start class with a cleansing breath.
Sometimes people just connect. It's not about being attracted to one another.
So, how many friends in their 20s do you have?
I don't know.
At some point, you will give birth to a child, and then what happens? Just because you're not like together doesn't mean that you haven't created a bond.
Nicole, I want to begin with you because I'm just fascinated by how this movie really plays with and subverts so many of the tropes of typical romantic movies. Can you tell me about what the germ of the idea and the tone of the script were?
Yeah. I think when I write something, I write from curiosity because like I want to see what happens or what it would be like. And I was very curious about a surrogate relationship. Like it's just such an intimate thing to endeavor on as complete strangers. And so, and I also knew that I wanted to tell a story both about a man who wanted to be a father. You know, I think we tell a lot of stories about women that are like, I just want to be a mother at all costs and I'll do it unconventionally even. And yet our stories about men becoming fathers tend to be either like accidental and they're dealing with the sudden fatherhood, or they're being like brought into it reluctantly. And I think that that's wrong. And I think there are men want to be dads. And so I wanted to tell that story. And I think we also tell a lot of stories about surrogacy with a melancholy, you know, kind of dour tilt where we think of it as a sacrifice or a conflict. And so I also wanted to tell a story about a surrogate who was aware of herself, who knew her boundaries, who knew what she was capable of. And the surrogacy is additive because that's what it is. Ultimately, you're helping to create a family, and it's a positive thing, and it's still very stigmatized. So that was kind of the germ. And then once I started writing, I was like, oh, look what's happening between them, and just kind of rolled with it. Yeah.
I love that. Ed and Patty, one at a time, can you tell me about when you first had a conversation with Nicole after reading the script? What were your main questions for her? Do you remember, Ed?
Oh boy, it was quite a while ago. What were my questions, Nicole? I'm sure they were very astute, and
they were so smart that I can't even remember them. They were too smart for me to hold on.
I think I probably asked a lot about her vision for the movie. I mean, there is a little bit of like standard actor director Q&A when you first meet. But I really was curious, you know, how Nicole wanted to make the movie and what she wanted it to feel like and look like. And a lot of those things affect my interest in something. So, but then also, really the question you just asked at the top, Dave, like what, you know, where did this come from? And everything that Nicole just said, I don't know, somehow that it feels like a familiar part of many conversations that we've had over the last couple of years. And it's awesome. It's just, this is a cool story.
Really. Patty, what about you? What were your biggest concerns when you read it?
I think at first I was like, why me? Like, why? At the time, I felt like I was like, everything that I'm doing is like making jokes. So like, I'm going to eat a dildo. That's kind of like the space that I felt like I was sitting in with my own work. And so then when the script came, that's like very like emotionally grounded and beautiful and thoughtful. And I was like, you know, and then like playing like a cis pregnant woman, I was like, you know, skeptical of like if I even, it just was so out of what I believed like my bounds were, or like what opportunities that would, you know, ever fall into my lap. So it was like very, I just like didn't know where to start. So it was pretty like, I think Nicole was doing a lot of soothing like me, because I was like, okay, like just tell me exactly how you want her voice to sound, and like I will do that. Like, what do you see her talking like? Oh my god, like just tell me, just force me to do it. Don't be afraid to hurt my feelings, because I want to do exactly what you want to do. And Nicole's like, well, I also want this to be like a rewarding experience for you. And I was like, no, don't say that, no. It was like I was really nervous at first, so it was just like, yeah, like Ed said, there's like these clarifying questions about like tonally, like where do you see this? Because I think there are a lot of, you know, like preconceived or like expectations, like with Ed, or like what asking me to do it, how I felt about my own work, or like how people perceived my work. It's like even talking about it like to other people earlier on, I was like, yeah, I'm like working on this movie soon with like Ed Helms, and we're going to be doing this thing. And they're like, oh, is it like slapstick? Is it going to be like real? It's like you both together like are very, you know, very deep into comedy, I guess, for lack of a better way to say that. But so I definitely had like a million questions, and I don't remember exactly what they were, but I know that I asked them with sheer terror. A natural childlike curiosity.
Nicole, did you, I almost like hesitate to ask this question. Did you ever have anybody who you were talking to about this movie, or who read the script, who maybe was going to put money in or something, say to you, oh, but can't they get together?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's a real journey to make. I hate using the word journey. Sorry. But it is like it's a long, windy road to try to get a movie made. It's so hard. And there were many times where I felt like I was almost there, and then there would be like but maybe they get together, or like, but maybe we can like film you know, maybe they can go on, maybe they live together, or maybe they do this. And it was always just like, I can't, there's no way, I can't, like the movie should not be made if that is what would happen to it. So I was very stubborn and very broke and very hopeful that it would come together the way that it had to be. And part of that is also Anthony Brandenisio, my producing partner. You know, I think like a lesser partner would have been like, well, maybe. I mean, like, if it means we can get the movie, but he really wasn't. He was like right dialed into what the movie is and what it was always meant to be and where it should go and how it should happen. And so he was up and out of those meetings with me, just like I was. His boots were just as much on fire. Yeah.
Did any of you three in the entire process ever have conversations on set where you thought, okay, here's a moment where, even though they're thankfully not going to get together, Matt and Anna, here's a moment where we can kind of play with the audience a little bit and play up the usual tropes and kind of psych the audience out, that to make them think that maybe they will, only to stick to our guns and have them not get together later? Or did you never even want to go down even that road?
Can I jump in here?
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I think we did, I don't know, there was a lot of discussion about this sort of what kind of vibe was being portrayed by different scenes. And I can really only speak for myself that I was really not, I did not want to convey any kind of romantic inkling, because I knew that the audience would be just projecting like hell the whole time. So as much as I could pull back from that and just be like authentic and earnest and let the story be what it is, I knew that we would be sort of fighting upstream against audience projection already. And I didn't want to feed into that. So I think that the movie kind of beautifully winds up subverting some of that projection from audiences. But for my part, I did not want to lean into that ever.
Exactly.
It was that's the right vibe, you know. I think like also there's a scene where Anna comes in and it's like lamps moving and it's like the hand on the bell and it's in bed and it is very intimate and I was like head to toe, has to be head to toe. Like I don't want to see them lying in bed side by side. And then, you know, you don't think about it at the time because there is so much intimacy between them. But when they hold hands on the bench, eating candy, then you're like, oh, right. They like really haven't touched aside from like the birthing class and stuff, but we haven't seen them hug, you know, and that was all very, I feel like that was just very natural because we were all three of us very much on the same page. I don't think we ever were like, do we want to put a hand on a hip or a shoulder here? Like we just knew, you know, the shared understanding of what the like physical language was. And that's partly why, you know, the birthing class is so, you know, hard and partly why the hand hold at the end is so impactful. Yeah, because of the restraint and just the space that their relationship lives in.
Patty, as a gay guy, I was so jazzed to learn after watching this movie, because I have to admit I was not familiar with you, that you are a trans performer playing this cisgender lead role in this film. I can't recall that happening before, and I think it's so special, and you did such a great job. Is that meaningful to you as a concept?
It is. It was like a huge, you know, thing at first to contemplate, you know, my involvement in the movie and what it would mean and all of the optics of it and everything that people would project onto it. And it, you know, I was anxious thinking about it and like wondering like, oh my gosh, what does all of this mean? And like, how could people like take this the wrong way or something like that, or project something negative onto this. But when I like kind of cleared all of that and was just like, okay, well, what do I want to do? And it's like, well, I want to like act in this movie. Like that's kind of like where I sat in my individual journey about it. But like, I hope that there are more, like a million more opportunities, not just for trans people to play roles that aren't explicitly written trans, but like any marginalized person. I think that we're in a very interesting space in our industry now where there's like more public conversations about representation and involvement and like inclusion writers and stuff. And that's great. But I think that like, you know, all representation isn't great representation. It's like a box, right? People box you in. People have their expectations of you. And if you're marginalized in our society in any way, people have perceptions of you that are like very rigid. And those perceptions of you affect like what opportunities you get if the person who's like in charge of hiring someone or writing something for someone is like, has their own box for you. And I know that's like a big part of the industry is like, you know, what's your type? Like what do you play? And there's people that feel like really typecast and stuff like that. This is such a long-winded answer, but I think like there are a lot of things that feel, even though they're well-meaning, it feels like you're not necessarily removing the box. They're just elevating the box and putting the box in the spotlight and being like, we cast like a trans person in this, but it's like the trans person is still in a box. It's just there's a flashlight on it. And this movie to me felt like the box was gone. And like this opportunity felt like I was entering like a space that I just really never imagined I would get. And this just felt like such an exciting thing. And it's like, I'm sometimes I wonder, I'm like, I don't know if I'll get like an opportunity like that again. It can feel like that sometimes. I'm optimistic, but yeah, it does mean a lot to me.
Nicole, one other thing I really appreciate about this movie, it is in some scenes this kind of fascinating hyperverbal film, but then you also have these moments kind of peppered through that are silent and very poignant, where whether they're kind of picking the paint color and taking the swatches off the wall, or when Matt is feeling the tummy, the baby kicking in the tummy, or my favorite, when Anna walks out of the shower. Did you specifically want those silent moments to counterbalance the more dialogue heavy stuff? And if so, did you have them spaced out in the movie in a kind of almost mathematical way, or am I reading way too much into this?
I feel like when I'm writing, I'm like the first audience to the movie, where I'm just kind of like the stenographer taking things down, being like, oh my goodness, that's what's happening. And so I think that balance came naturally. I think if you've just absorbed a lot of vocal connectivity and exchanging of information, then just naturally my inclination is, let's let that steep, and while that's steeping, we'll take in this visual level of communication. But yeah, I don't outline anything, and I'm not very structured. So I just, I just let it roll. And I think some would say I'm indulgent in my restraint, which is a riddle in and of itself. But I love quiet. I love slowness. I love space. I love to just see what happens. And so that's where that just comes from.
Ed, there's so many great supporting characters in this movie. That's another thing I love, is that these supporting characters who would normally kind of be these stock portrayals have so much personality to them. My favorite, maybe if I'm saying her name right, is Sufi Bradshaw, who played the technician, the medical technician. I thought she was hilarious. I loved everything she did. When you think back to whether it's Tig Notaro or Nora Dunn or all these great people, Fred Melamed, who was like the biggest wild card on the set, where from take to take, it could just be something totally crazy different and keeping you on your toes?
I think Fred Melamed to me was like, he to me is such an he's such an anchor of Hollywood. Like, he's been around for so long. He's been in so many important and meaningful movies, maybe just in my life, I don't know, but he's just the ultimate journeyman. And I was so thrilled to be able to act with him. And he's such a warm, funny guy. And he's someone who just had, like, between takes, he just would really engage with those huge, warm eyes that just suck you in, and like tell you a story about some other actor, some crazy experience. And with that voice that just rolls out like gravy. I mean, he's amazing. I don't know. I loved every minute on set with him.
Patty, was there someone you were particularly excited to work with? Obviously, you and Julio Torres have a history together, but who were you most excited to work with?
There were so many of my close friends are in this movie that I think it's astronomically kind of like crazy to think of like that, like, I didn't have any control over the casting process, but like, I mean, like Greta Teidelman and Joe Firestone and Julio Torres, like, those are all people who are like extremely close friends of mine. It was so like amazing to have them each like on set at different times, because it was like a very, nerve-wracking experience at times, just to like step outside my comfort zone. And like, there was so much comfort like in having them there. Like, I don't think there was like one specific person. I mean, Tig just was so formative in me kind of like turning toward doing comedy. So it was very intimidating. But yeah, the cast is insane. Rosalind Chow, like Joy Luck Club, and like What Dreams May Come, like those movies were like a big part of my childhood. And like it was I don't know, there were just so many moments when I was like, oh wow, I forgot.
Well, you all meshed beautifully together. and together. See what I did there? And I congratulate you on a really original and terrific film. So Nicole Beckwith, Ed Helms, Patty Harrison, thank you so much for taking the time. And thanks to all of you for sticking around tonight. Bye, everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks.